welcome to our program Where God Weeps, a program in which we speak about the situation of the suffering church around the world. Nigeria is roughly divided in half between Christians, living mostly in the southern and central parts of the country, and Muslims, concentrated mostly in the northern and southwestern regions. It is in this territory where most of the terrorist attacks of Boko Haram have happened, becoming world known for its violence and cruelty. To talk about the situation of Christians in Nigeria, it is my privilege to welcome to our program Bishop Mathew Kukha from the diocese of Sokoto. Your Excellency, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Your Excellency, you come from the Sokoto area in northern Nigeria, which is notorious for the illiteracy rate and also for the extreme poverty situation of some of the families. Can you describe us briefly what is it to be the pastor of this region?
First of all, it's a great opportunity. I remember when I was appointed and I saw the Holy Father for Benedict Emeritus. When he had been introduced that I was from Sokoto, I remember he said to me, "You are on a difficult assignment, but God will be with you." Those were very powerful words for me. So being in Sokoto, it's despite the seemingly rather not very significant numerical strength of the Christian and Catholic community, our impact is quite phenomenal. Luckily for me, I have had a bit of name recognition in Nigeria over the last 20 or 30 years. So when I arrived Sokoto, a lot of Muslims were people I had already known. I had known the Sultan before getting to Sokoto. I know the former president of Nigeria who turned 90 last week, and a lot of other people. So I've had a tremendous welcome, in Sokoto. But to come back to your question, Sokoto, you must remember, is the seat of the Caliphate, which came into being in 1804 and stayed on until 1903 when the British conquered the Caliphate. So the illiteracy rate in Sokoto, and by extension, most of the area that is coterminous with northern Nigeria, more or less the 12 or so key predominantly Muslim states in northern Nigeria, the high illiteracy rate there is also ideological, in part because there has been a very deliberate aversion, to Western education on the grounds that this is the education of the conqueror. This is the language of the conqueror. And so that explains why there is a high illiteracy rate at the level of Western education. But at the level of Islamic education, Sokoto, that particular area, if they go for Quranic competition, Nigerians are likely to take, they've taken first position. And so from the point of view of what the Muslims consider to be education, which for them is the Quranic education, they will tell you that they are competing with Oxford or Harvard. So that is the ideological reason. But of course, for a modern state like Nigeria, there is a correlation between the acquisition of Western education, modernization, and access to the bureaucracy and power.
Progress.
That also expresses the reason why there are such high poverty rates in Sokoto and by extension most parts of northern Nigeria.
So, Your Excellency, this is like an ideal environment for the development of extremist fundamentalists?
Well, in a way, but I think that those who equate poverty with extremism don't tell the full story. I don't agree, because it's not every poor person that is necessarily
an extremist.
An extremist. But poverty is a necessary condition for the growth of extremism. But it doesn't, as I say, tell the whole story. I think what is really at stake in Nigeria, just like many other continents around the world, or in Asia, in Africa, there is a direct correlation between the persistence of poverty and the emergence of various forms of extremism. Some of them may be religious, some of them may be ethnic, some of them may be class, some of them may be gender. So in percentage terms, women, for example, right across Nigeria and most parts of Africa, constitute a huge and dominant class of the impoverished. So the point to make is that it's not so much the poverty, but there has really never been a convergence between the ideals of the modern democratic state and the realities, of traditional societies in Africa that have never really been able to come together. So it seems to me that what we call extremism, in whatever shape or form, is actually the poor man's response to the debilitating, conditions of poverty, which is the result of the corruption of the political elite. I'm
glad you mentioned that word corruption. You've been quite outspoken about that, Your Excellency, the cancer of Nigeria in terms of the corruption, and how this has reflected increasing the economic differences between the super wealthy and these extreme poverty situations of some families. What can Nigeria as a country do about this cancer?
Look, I'm concerned about what the church can do and what the church should do. Let's start from there. The Holy Father, Pope Francis, has brought the whole question of the unacceptable degrees of inequality to the front burner. This finds very clear, eloquent testimony in Evangelii Gaudium. Now, the Holy Father's anger is also directly related to the anger of Jesus Christ himself. I worry that I'm not sufficiently angry enough. And I think that the church needs a high dosage of moral indignation for us to confront this totally unacceptable, incredible deepening of inequality, especially for me in a country like Nigeria, where, as somebody said, there may not be enough to meet everybody's greed around the world, but there is enough to meet everybody's needs. Majority of ordinary Nigerians who are living in unacceptable conditions of poverty have absolutely no business with poverty, because this is a country that is extraordinarily wealthy. But we must also concede, that Western nations, we are a toga of righteousness when it is convenient for them. When it comes to the exploitation of resources across Africa, we know what Western multinational corporations are doing. We know the tendency of their governments to turn a blind eye. When we spin into convulsion, then they say, well, we cannot interfere, in the policies in the internal policies of countries. But increasingly,
in regards about exploitation,
well, exactly, because really it is there is a direct correlation between the gaping hole, that produces inequality and the wealth and the growth of the empires of Europe. So we must find a convergence, in terms of how to deal with this problem. But for me, I believe that Catholic bishops' conferences across Africa must do much more. In the very powerful post-synodal exhortation in Ecclesia in Africa, the late, Pope John Paul II, and now Saint John Paul, of happy memory, encourages the bishops of Africa to confront this reality. And I think for me, like I said, my worry is that we have not been angry enough. And I think we need to be far more angrier than we are now about the state of inequality, in Africa. Otherwise, we lose the right to worry about extremism, because this extremism is born out of, maybe you can say, the Muslims. Some of them who are on the fringes are sufficiently angry enough to go out and kill somebody, or to destroy institutions that are not working in their favor. We don't accept that. But I think that our silence produces some of these, distortions that we find.
The world was literally shocked with the news of around April 2014 about the kidnapping of about 270 Nigerian girls. What is the current situation of these girls?
You know, in Sokoto, when the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, which went viral, we decided, I mobilized the Christians, but beginning with the Catholic Church in Sokoto, and we took to the streets. It was unprecedented, but we took to the streets in Sokoto, to express our resentment. But I issued a statement, and part of the things I issued in that statement was that we must consider the 219 Chibok girls as merely a metaphor. They are a symbol of the things, the unacceptable, vulnerable conditions of young girl children across predominantly northern Nigeria, where young girls are being married off at the ages of 8, 9, 10, 11 against their wishes. So, in fact, the very fact that Boko Haram is holding those children and that it can round up that number of children and take as child slaves, as sex slaves and so on, it's actually born out of the fact that we have not paid much attention, to what is happening to young children in northern Nigeria, especially because there was a debate, for example, in the Nigerian parliament 2 years ago as to what is the acceptable age of marriage, for young girls. In 26 states across the 36 states of Nigeria, there seems to be some kind of an agreement. But in about 10 or so states, in northern Nigeria, there's no consensus as to what the age of marriage is. So to come to the point, my argument is that there are many girls who are being held seemingly in forced marriages. They don't have a voice. The Chibok girls, as I said, is a metaphor for us to understand that there is a far greater battle for us to fight, for ordinary young growing up girls, to deal with the problems of their future, because they are clearly, in very many respects, an endangered species. Right across northern Nigeria, the whole idea of VVF, which happens as a result of young children giving out in marriage before they reach adulthood. So there's a lot of problems, but as I said, I thought the Chibok girls issue has gained national attention. But don't forget, Boko Haram has kidnapped hundreds of young girls. What was dramatic about Chibok was that these children were in a school, but there are, before them and after them, there have been hundreds of other people less fortunate.
Your Excellency, there are approximately 44,000, a little bit more than that, Catholic faithful in your diocese. Do they live in fear?
They don't live in fear. Let me tell you, but maybe I should modify that. The first thing is, people live in fear now because, to respond to your question, a lot of people have moved ahead of the elections. But they're not afraid that they're going to be physically attacked on the streets because they are Christians. It is that they have had, we have a saying in Africa that if you've been burnt by fire, when you see ashes, you're likely to get afraid. Now, we've had a pretty long history of over the last 30 or so years of businesses belonging to Christians, because if you come to Sokoto, for example, maybe 80 or 90%, really, maybe 90% or even more of the shops that you're going to find on the streets of Sokoto, the entire streets of Sokoto, most of them are likely to be owned by Christians. And of course, like every set of urban violence, businesses on the highways are always vulnerable. What also that means is that when these young people express their indignation through indiscriminate attacks, the percentage of people who suffer, who are businessmen and women, is largely Christian. The second point, of course, is that the churches also have been identified as some of those areas where in northern Nigeria, these young Muslims are likely to go out and vent their spleen. But there have been new developments. In the last perhaps 10 or more years, the Christian population, the Catholic population, finding it totally unacceptable and unable to rely absolutely on the Nigerian police, and people have now taken adequate measures to quote-unquote protect themselves. So what happened in 2011, even if it attempted to happen in 2015, I think that you're likely to find Christians far more alert. Because in any case, since 2011, I mean, I got to Sokoto on, September 8th, 2011. And by 2012, up till today, every blessed day on Sunday, the highway leading to the cathedral and all the churches, there are policemen and there are security men in every church in Sokoto, almost every part of northern Nigeria. So that's why I think also you can relate that to the relative silence in the attacks on churches and so on and so forth. But as a Nigerian, from the point of view of fear of, let's say, being a Christian, wearing a suit is one of the rare things I do. But whenever I'm traveling in and out of Sokoto, wherever I am in Sokoto, I'm always in my full regalia. And there are very few people who don't know me, in Sokoto. People greet me extremely politely. They don't see me as a Christian or a Nigerian bishop. In fact, a friend of mine who is a Muslim was saying to me one day jokingly at the airport, he said, look, I don't like it when they call you the Catholic Bishop of Sokoto. They should call you the Bishop of Sokoto because we too are part of your flock. So it's not, I don't think that, I don't feel a sense of fear that because I'm a Christian, this is what is going to happen. On the contrary, it is that anything can go wrong for me or for the next person because Nigeria, the quality of policing, the quality of protection of life and property is totally inadequate. I think if you take that point, then you can appreciate the fact that if we're insecure in Nigeria, we're not insecure because we're Christians. We're insecure because we're victims of a state that its capacity to defend and protect its citizens is seriously in need of modification.
You just mentioned something about a Muslim friend. What is the general sentiment between Muslims and Christians in Nigeria? I know it's very significant, the concentration in the northern or in the southern part, meaning Christians in the south and Muslims in the north. But in the day-by-day life, how is the relationship between Christians and Muslims in Nigeria?
For more than 10, 15, 20 years now, I've agonized. I don't like the word Christians and Muslims. I really don't. It is largely a product of a binary view that the West has about Africa. We've migrated from ethnicity, that is, when there are conflicts in Africa, they are between tribes. When there are conflicts in northern Nigeria, they are between religions. The truth of the matter is that, look, we have maybe occasionally, once in a year, twice in a year, when things go wrong, but there are 363 or 362 days, as the cardinal in Abuja, Cardinal Onaikan, would like to say, when we are all living happily. I mean, we're in the market, we're in the business, we're in hotels, I have addressed almost every significant group in Nigeria. Just this morning, I got a text from somebody, I don't even know him. He says, my name is Alhaji so and so. He's a prominent Muslim. He said, I want to see you wherever you are. And I get a lot of people, they travel all the way from Abuja, from Sokoto, from wherever, just to say they're coming to see me. Now, they come to see me not because I'm a Christian. I mean, a lot of people don't want this whole idea of Christians and Muslims. It doesn't define us as Nigerians. And I think what we should be pushing for, and I say to my German friends, Hitler did a lot of bad things. But people don't talk about Hitler as a Catholic or a Christian. They just talk about a man who did bad things. And I think we should focus on that reality, that we are just intrinsically, we have the capacity for good or for evil. And it's got nothing to do with religion. And I think unless we push on that fact, we will continue to, fail to understand. And if we don't define the fault lines correctly, it will not be possible for us to find a solution. So the truth of the matter is that in Nigeria, right now, for example, we have two key presidential candidates who are contesting the election. One is, call it a Christian, but his director of campaign is a Muslim. The chairman of his party is a Muslim. And they are literally dying to make sure he becomes president. The guy who is a Muslim, who wants to be president, his director of campaign is a Christian, is a Catholic. The chairman of their party is a Catholic, a communion-receiving Catholic. They are desperately dying to make sure he becomes president. So it's not as simplistic as we want to make it. Nigeria is an extraordinarily great country, but there are a lot of criminals. And they are criminals. They go to church, they go to the mosque. It doesn't make them Christian. They don't represent Islam or Christianity. So my argument has been we should isolate and name this devil so we can deal with it
Your Excellency, it's really exciting to hear you talking so alive and with such passion. And I think that that is the church in Africa. What do you think is the contribution that the church, the Catholic Church in Africa, can bring to the whole universal church?
You know, the world has always focused on ideology, you know, because inherently passion is something we treasure. Okay, for 50 years, most of the passion was deployed to ideology. Now ideology has ended. I think we've lost a sense of passion. And I think that perhaps what Africa can help to export to the world is to move away from the fact that, look, the world is just, everything is just about materialism. And like Pope Francis would say, the throwaway culture, you know. But that there is more to life, and that we may not, it's not defined by how much wealth we have. Despite this poverty, you don't find many people in Africa committing suicide because life is unbearable. If you find a poor woman on the street with 3 children or 6 children, and you say, please, let me take one away so I can take the child to Europe and feed, they will say no. So I think our celebration of life, our vitality, our capacity and ability to endure suffering from slavery right through to genocide to where we are today, it's a clear demonstration of the fact that as Christians, you know, given the fact that the cross of Christ is the source of our redemption, I think all that Africa can and must bring to the world with a great sense of urgency is that, you know, beyond the cross of Christ, beyond suffering and pain, there is hope. And I think that alone for me, because we're facing a world that is increasingly fractured and falling apart, not due to lack of material comfort, but because we're faced with a world that has lost its soul. So if there's much that Africa can bring to the world, not with any sense of righteousness, it is that amidst all this desperation and degradation, there is, at the end of it all, a lot of hope for the world.
And what would you like our viewers to know about your needs, Your Excellency? What would you say are your most prominent needs? Spiritual, financial, whatever?
Well, I think we go back to this word solidarity, you know, and again, like I don't remember who said it, but that, you know, nobody in the world is so rich that they cannot receive. And nobody is so poor that they cannot give. I think, you know, the whole idea that human life should not be defined by color, by status, by gender, and that it is a gift of God is something that is very important. And I think once we accept our common humanity, other things can flow from there. For us, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities in Sokoto, great opportunities. And I give you just one example. I mean, we are very poor, and like you said, we're just about 400, I mean, you know, 40,000 brothers across the diocese. In Sokoto metropolis, we're probably less than 10,000. But we built a health facility, you know, with support from Miserio. And it was a wonderful event because I called the Sultan. He's a friend of mine. He just lives up the street. I'm on number 1. He is at the end of the street. And we have a wonderful relationship. I mean, I meet him and he says to me, look, today is Monday, and you took collections on Sunday. You should come and pay your tithe to me. And I said to him, well, let's have a joint account of the Diocese of Sokoto and the Sultanate. I mean, we have a wonderful relationship. You know, but we built a clinic. So, and I went to him and I said, look, I would like you to come and cut the tape and dedicate this clinic. And he came. This is the head of all the Muslims in Nigeria. And in his speech, he said something very interesting. He said, look, you know, we're suffering from malaria. The malaria, you know, mosquito is far more ingenious than we are, because the mosquito goes to the church on Sunday and goes to the mosque on Friday when we are praying. So, you know, we should be like the mosquito because we are all victims of malaria that he's dispensing to all of us. And in opening that clinic, he says, look, there are no Christian sicknesses or Muslim sicknesses. We must all stick together. It was an extraordinarily powerful statement. So on the material side, I say if we had a little bit of more support, one would be we need to build, for example, one of the dreams I have is to be able to build what I call a state-of-the-art school in Sokoto for boys, one for boys and one for girls. In that way, we will be rearing a generation that will be free from the virus of terrorism and extremism, that will be free, that can idealize and dream about a new society. Because the tragedy with our situation in Nigeria is that, first of all, nobody Let me put it that way. It's only the Christian community, and by extension the Catholic Church, that has a wonderful track record of having created spaces for interactions through its educational system. But now, in most parts of northern Nigeria, because we rely on our little collections, there's very little, there isn't much that we can do. But those practical steps are not only a witness, they also helped to breed, for me, they are the greatest antidote against extremism. It's not the sermons, it's not the preachings, because if at the end of the day, you can't create a space where, for example, young Muslims and young Christians are playing together. And I give you an example, sorry to take your time, but last year, Sokoto Diocese celebrated its 50th anniversary as a diocese. And what I did with the young people, because we cover 4 states, I asked the youth to organize football matches. And we ended up, the celebration was on the 19th. On the 18th, we had, like the finals, because they did the football matches. But we insisted that in every team, there must be Christians and Muslims. Okay. And the young people on their own, the Catholic youth, they went to other churches and brought players. They got a few Muslims. And in the finals, the goalkeeper for the Catholic side was a Muslim. And the goalkeeper, it was a wonderful, testimony, because it reminded me of Pope John Paul II, who, according to his biographer, that at the time, when they used to play football with the Jewish kids, in Poland, there'll be time they won't have a goalkeeper, and he volunteered as a goalkeeper, even though his biographer said he was a lousy goalkeeper. But it is that we need those kind of spaces, and for me, that's the kind of thing that we would do if we had a bit of more support, on the financial side.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for sharing with us all this passion and this, I think, very hopeful information about your wonderful country.
Thank you very much, and keep up the good work. We appreciate very, very deeply what you're doing, what you represent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
God bless you.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us in another episode of Where God Weeps. If you want to learn more about the situation of the church in Nigeria, we encourage you to contact the information at the end of this program. Thank you, and God bless.